This is All the Things with Michelle Wolfe. Today, I am joined by Pat McCabe, Woman Stands Shining. Can you explain a little bit about that and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me today. I'm Diné by lineage and bloodline. So I'll say She'e'ia, Tachi Inashli, Aro Ashi Ibashish Chin, Madishkeshne Dashanale, Klauschi Dashiche, Kwatawastani Inashli. So I'm telling you about my mother's clans. And as my daughter says, people know us incorrectly as Navajo, but we call ourselves Diné and in our own language. And then I was adopted into the Lakota spiritual way of life. I keep saying 30 years, but I've been saying that for a few years, so I'm not sure I have to do the math. It's probably a little longer.
You might need to recount.
Yeah. But in that way, I had the honor of being given this name, Weyakpa Najin Win, Woman
Mm.
Stand Shining.
It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm here in my home in northern New Mexico. And yeah, I'm kind of on a little bit of a break from a lot of work right now, but I'm really happy to have this conversation today. Yeah.
Yes, I'm so excited and thank you for so when I put the call out to have this conversation, I'm just going through my own stuff and I'm realizing like how much I actually don't know about menopause and perimenopause and how much we don't talk about this. And so, that curious part of me was like, I don't know, I kind of want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And does anybody want to talk about it? And I was so delighted, honestly. Did you see how many women commented on that post to be like,
Yeah.
yes, and also were making connections with themselves. Like I saw a couple people who were like, hey, I want to talk, and they do similar things and they're like, we should talk about that. And I love that. And when we both got on the call earlier, I was saying women are so good at weaving the web, we make connection. And did you want to share? You don't have to, but did you want to share where you just came from before we got on this call? Because I think it's so speaks to like what we're getting ready to talk about here.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I just came from a women's community that I have the deep pleasure and honor and destiny, I guess I'll call it, to be a part of. It's called Women Bridging Worlds. And it was actually born out of a leadership program that came out of the Pioneers. And I guess the feminine side of Pioneers at one time was called Moonrise.
Hmm.
And so there was different iterations of bringing together women leaders to be in community. But some of us have been in this community for, gosh, a while now, like 8 or 9 years. And so I just said it's a community of women that are powerhouse, make it happen
From all
women,
over the world, or
from mostly the United States.
okay,
And but we just have a space to just be really real about what's happening,
I love that.
and it's so
And just have
nourishing.
like real conversations, and you just said it's so nourishing. It
Yeah,
is, yeah. And
very.
I think that's why I want to talk about this because, as I'm going through what feels like perimenopause myself, I'll be 43 in just a couple weeks here. It feels a little early for me, but I'm not surprised at the same time because my daughter, who is about to turn 11 tomorrow, is going through her own transition. And I learned that, and I'm not surprised, we mirror each other so much, and in our closeness, it amplifies things. So as she's going through it, it can like sort of stimulate or evoke me going through it or vice versa. We're kind of doing it together. And I think that's a common story that plays out for mothers and daughters in close proximity. So it gives me, empathy into, reminding me about her journey when she's giving me more attitude lately and being, just snippy or just not herself, or what I perceive her to be as herself. And then I'm feeling myself. I feel my hormones raging. Like I'm very intuitive and sensitive in my own body. I knew I was pregnant before I confirmed I was pregnant. You know what I mean? Like that. Like I know. And I can just feel my hormones like raging in my body. And it feels like craziness sometimes. And if you don't have that connection with your body, you probably, I mean, I sympathize like that. It's like my mind is just be like, and our hormones so much affect our thought process, and then that informs our emotions. And it can be a cycle if we don't, you know, have some awareness around that. So
For sure. Yeah, I'm hardly know where to start because it's
I
such a long
know.
the story of womanhood is a long story. But I do want to back up a little bit and talk about my moon time and the transition
Hmm.
moving in. So I again, once again, had the honor and privilege of being taught some things about moon time and ceremony. And and I feel comfortable talking about it because honestly, the male dominated ceremonies that I've come out of reject any of this information. So I don't feel like I'm outing any secrets that anybody feels like they want to hold. So, anyways, I feel like what I wanted to say about it is what I learned is that my biology gives me a spiritual capacity.
Hmm.
And that's not something anybody ever said to me in modern world paradigm. It kind of had to happen in ceremonial paradigm. And so it was in ceremony that I began to reconsider what my biology or my gender was like what it was about or what it could be about, you know. And so I had the privilege of bleeding and having my moon time well, I'll say in consciousness for about 7 years. And so in that way, I would create my own space, or sometimes we could create a space as community, but that was kind of rare, honestly, because again, moontime women's business is very taboo under the this power over paradigm, which
It's
we sometimes
I find it very dismissive. Yeah.
yeah
Disregard. Yeah.
yeah we sometimes equate with the patriarchy. I don't anymore, but I want to, I think men are something other than the patriarchy, and I want to know who they are. But that's another story.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's hard to really have this presence. But I created these spaces for myself often, and what and it was with teachings that were given to me by some elder women, in which I was told, at this time, well, anytime a human being is spilling blood, they are much more open and closer to the spirit world.
Mm.
And so it's much easier for us to receive vision and dream at that time. And that has to do biologically with that cervix opening. So that gateway between heaven and earth, between
The
the spirit
portal.
and material.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so once that's open, there's a phenomenon that happens with a woman at that time. And so one, I was also told that that material is very holy. It's the dismantling of the sacred altar of life.
Yes.
So that's our very beginning. And if life is the highest ideal, which I speak about in other places, but anyway, if life is our highest ideal, then that's one of the highest offerings we could be giving to this Mother Earth, is that lifeblood at the beginning, which would be
Yes.
the beginning of our life, right? And at the end of our life, we would give our body to her, which is like so it's like the Alpha and Omega offering
Hmm.
of our gratitude for this life. And right now in modern world paradigm, we're asked to withhold both from her, and that's a problem. But
And it's unnatural and goes against our nature.
yes, I would say
Yes.
so. I think that's a part of
Hmm.
angst, angst that we carry along with many others, but that's definitely a part of one, I think.
There's no room for it. Well, the perception is there's no room for it.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
yet it's something like I'm continually in awe of women. Like we are amazing creatures. Like we're what we go through, how changeable we are, and yet how we function, how we hold things together, how you know, make connection, all of it. I'm in awe. I'm very proud to be a woman.
Yeah, and I wasn't to start with. I really looked over, I
I
think
wasn't either.
you
Yeah.
responded to that writing that I
That's
did
been
on
a
Facebook
journey.
at some point, right? Which was like, these guys have all the agency, and these people over here, these women, they don't seem to have much say. They're always trying to figure out how to control these.
Hmm.
And so I was just like, no, I'm gonna be a man, thank you. And like I said in that writing, I'm like, but when I say that, I don't mean that I forego my feminine or even my gender. I just want to express my gender in the freedom that is happening over there. That's
Yes.
that's really what I was saying.
Hmm.
So so anyways, to go back to this thing about the Moon Lodge, So, what I was also told is that we have an opportunity to make that offering to the Mother Earth, but at the same time, with that gateway open, we have this extraordinary opportunity to receive from this Mother Earth. So, in Lakota culture, it's often said, the women are the backbone of the family, the women are the backbone of the community. And so, to myself, I say, well, then where does she get hers, right? And I realized, well, if she can have that time to be with the Mother Earth, to sit on the Mother Earth and dream and really connect and have this incredible exchange going on of giving this offering, but then also receiving nurturing, nourishment. But not only that, and this is the exciting part to me, but also dream, vision,
Mm.
and actually direct instruction from the Mother Earth. I mean, what's
Which
more
is
amazing, fantastical than that, right?
and I that's why, I mean, for me, that's why during, that time, so much will come in for us, we'll get all stirred up and, people, the people in our lives might be upset sometimes about that, but it's for a purpose. Like there is a sacredness to our chaos.
Well, and it wouldn't be chaos, I don't think, if, so as you were pointing out
Chaos
about,
in terms of like that we're so changeable. Women are so changeable and go through so much transition, even in a month's time, even just biologically, our hormones are, ever changing.
right. But again, I'm going to say chaos, when there isn't a space or understanding, it feels like chaos because it's
Yes,
moving against the grain of everything
absolutely.
around you.
Hmm.
But really, it's obviously half the population is going through a very natural thing, which we're not accommodating. So I guess
Yes,
what I'm going to say is, you and your daughter starting to sync points out this really incredible thing that happens, right? So when women all live together or even work together, what happens, right? We our
we
moon
sync
times.
up. Hmm.
So what kind of medicine is that for our
Beautiful.
world, for our society, for our communities, for our families? So what I was told is that at one time, during that time, all the women on their moon time. So you got to picture it. You're in a I don't know. I guess I'll say tribal community, maybe, or a smaller community. And at some point, all the women of childbirthing time of life withdraw from the community, and they all go into their own space. And they say that they used to go into the teepee lodges and they would sleep with their heads all to the center and they would have communal dreams together.
That is so amazing. I can just
And
only imagine because when we do come together and our energies intertwine in that way, it amplifies.
oh, it really amplifies. I've had an
Hmm.
opportunity to be in those lodges during ceremonies, and it's so powerful because everybody moves into a synchronicity.
Hmm.
Sleep at the same time, wake at the same time. At one point, I was in a ceremony, everybody got sick at the same time,
Oh, man.
sick to our stomach, but it was energetic, right? And
Hmm.
so the very wise spiritual leader who was holding the larger ceremony that the Moon Lodge was held within took that as a sign and said, "All right, something's. I felt something going on, but now this is the sign from the women who are in this deep place of listening. So everybody goes into the sweat lodge, and we're all going to purify, and we're going to come out, and we're going to renew right here." So, I mean, that's the kind of role that lodge could have in a community.
I love that you
And
said that, a deep place of listening.
the deepest place
Yeah.
of listening. And so
Yes.
the elder women would come and they would tend, and it's hard for a woman this is the other thing I noticed. That energy builds so powerfully that when a woman or anybody enters who's not on their moon time, it's highly, highly disruptive and highly uncomfortable. So it only be short times when an elder woman would come to check on things, but
Mm.
also to inquire if there was any dreams or visions that wanted to be shared. And so those dreams and visions could be then taken to whatever leadership, male and female, probably in other times, to decide, well, what does this mean, and what does this mean for our course of action for our community?
Hmm.
So that's how deep and powerful that medicine is. That modern world really is pretty adamant about negating and holding out, or we're we have spaces that we create just only as individuals oftentimes, but we don't ever get to be in this whole
Community in
larger
that way. Yeah.
community, but also being held by even the community outside of that.
Hmm. We
So
had talked
given
about locally here, organizing what are they still referred to as red tent ceremonies? Women coming together from, women just starting their cycle or whatever, and then moving through that in the various stages. Um, it never got organized, and I'm kind of disappointed about that. And maybe it will still, but I would love to be able to see women come together and support each other in real ways like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what would be better for us now than to have some way of receiving direct instruction from the Mother Earth right now?
Hmm.
And I think it could, and maybe I'll even go as far as to say should be our highest priority. So that was my background, which I can't hardly believe that I got to have that experience and that knowledge, like that knowing. Like I don't have to wonder about it. There's no negation going on in the world that can undo what I
What you got to
experienced and witnessed,
experience.
and the
I love
spaces that I've
that.
had with other women.
Yeah.
I've had so many moon lodges in so many circumstances. In fact, every time I'm in a gathering, that's the first thing I want to do is where could we create a space for the moon women, and even like more political or more academic gatherings, that's what I would want to do, and sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't, but probably now I'm going to recommit saying this out loud. But
And some intentionality. Yeah.
yeah. So then moving on into this next phase, I mean, the grandmothers tended me so deeply during those 7 years of moon time. And then I started going through the change. And I started going through the change, I'd say about 42, 43. My MD kept telling me, no, 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 that's not
Hmm.
possible. But I
It's,
could
yep.
feel everything shifting. And so I started getting, well, people started telling me what to expect, right? And they were telling me, well, prepare to start feeling invisible now that you're going to become this older woman. You're going to be invisible to the whole world, and
Mm.
you're relegated to, this doddering old lady thing. And so anyway, all this kind of talk was coming my way, not so much in the ceremonial field, although I watched it in some ways happen there too. But anyway, so I remember I went into this one sweat. Well, and I will say I had a husband at that time, and we were doing ceremony. We were holding ceremony for the community. And there were other things going on, but I really do feel like a big part of it was he could not deal with my process of aging and coming into this new space. And so he left. So that's also kind of a pretty common story in modern world paradigm, for what happens at this time of this
Mm.
shift. And so anyways, I found myself in a sweat lodge and I was just really angry. I was raging around, and that was why I went in there, because I wanted to purify, but I ended up ranting in there, and my beautiful brothers held it down while I went off, about it all.
I love that. Yep.
But I came home that night, and the grandmothers came to me, right? And they said, listen, we didn't bring you this far to drop you on your head. What do you think? So this road that you're on, this womanhood road, it's going to continue now. It's, we're still here. It's still on. Nobody's abandoning you in this realm. And and that's when they told me this story about it. And they said, so, going through this time is radical. It's a radical, radical shift. Do not underestimate how radical it is and how radical it needs to be. And they said, you are going to go into labor again. And this time you're going to birth yourself.
Yes.
You're going to
Yes.
birth yourself as the fruitful woman.
Mm.
People think of the fruitful woman as being the woman of childbearing age, but but this fruitfulness goes so far beyond all of that. So remember, if you had been a woman in a community, in a society that understood the possibility of what happens, how your biology contributes spiritually to the whole, and you were put in community moon lodge from your first moon until your last. So I was thinking that's probably like 35 years or so or more of moon times, and
Yeah.
times that by 12. Imagine the source of wisdom, insight, energy, guidance, direction that you would be at this age.
That you have
You,
access to and growth from. Yeah.
you would be one of the most precious and most valuable resources of the entire community. Like, how could you not be? And so, even though you don't get to have that experience at the moment necessarily, we want you to invoke what that might feel like as much as you can, because that's going to help you through this time. And so they said, so when we say labor, we mean like labor. They said, have you ever seen a werewolf movie? And I was like, oh my God. And they're like, yeah, it's that radical. Like your bones are popping and your sinew is snapping and you got hairs and you do really get hairs
Yeah,
popping
I
out.
know.
Uh,
I
Great
keep getting
eyebrows.
them right here.
And they said, it's that radical. And they said,
Mhm.
or you could look at it like if you were the caterpillar going into the cocoon, like that caterpillar doesn't know if it's ever going to be an anything ever again. Like it's
Yep.
that deep.
And it becomes mush. And then from that becomes something beautiful. Hmm.
Yeah. So we say, they said, so, and this was a recommendation, and I don't know that it was for like everybody at large, but I know it was definitely directed to me. I was told, so as you're trying to mitigate all this, we suggest that you stick with only what the plants can give you.
Hmm.
And I think what that is referring to is not going with animal hormone and not going with synthetics, right? I mean, I guess you could say synthetics at some point were plant,
Hmm.
but so again, I'm not saying that as a blanket statement to the world, but that was what
This is your journey.
I
Yeah.
chose to follow, right? And it was intense. Oh my gosh. And I really think part of the reason it was so intense for me is because I used to think women were just carrying on and that couldn't really be that bad. I was like, come on, get a grip, and so I feel like I had to have like a big old dose. They're like, yeah,
It's one of
yes.
those like what you resist persists or kind of example. Oh man.
So, so yeah, for me, it was so deep. So one, for instance, I stopped being able to read, and that actually persists. I think maybe I could read, but I'm kind of so in the habit of not reading right now. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's painful. It's the certain kind of attentiveness and focus and that kind of thing. That my nervous system was like, no way, we're not doing that. And so, at the same time, I'm getting called to speak and teach all over the world. And I'm on all these panels with all these amazing people. So I have this stack of books over here that are signed by the authors to me on all these amazing subjects. And I'm sorry to say that I keep them because it means something to me,
And who
but I can't.
knows, you might read them someday
I might
or
read them. That's what I'm
yeah.
thinking. Maybe at some point I'll be able to do that again. But
Hmm.
just to say how the change came. So I also felt like every afternoon, there was like this freight train moving through my nervous system, and also this fatigue. And I would want to lay down, but it's like trying to lay down after you've had 10 cups of coffee. Like you're so
Yes.
sleepy, but you can't fall asleep, and whatever's grinding in here. So literally for me, it was like being in labor, and this went on for a couple of years, of just, from a certain point in mid-afternoon and always till sundown. Like once the sun went down, everything would release. But there was this period of anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours of,
Where your
of
body
really,
feels activated, right?
oh
And
boy, activate
yeah.
is really describing it, because all I could do is just sit and pant, like literally like when you're in labor,
Mhm.
just. And so, I mean, you learn something when you do that day after day. And yet I was still being called. So I'll go back to moon time too. And what I found was I would oftentimes get asked to speak in front of, I don't know, a big crowd of people, 500,000 people or something. And I would go on my moon, and like out of nowhere, so to speak. And I was wondering, like, because that's the last time you want, like, you get introspective. We say
Yeah.
that's the difference between a moon time woman. She gets introspective. she's moving, her energy is moving inward and downward, flowing literally downward, whereas other times you're kind of more like out and up, or even in our ceremonies, like everybody else is praying like this and you're going
Mm-hmm.
like, so the motion is really different, right? So here I am supposed to be the speaker projecting whatever, and I'm not in the mood, but I started having this sense like, the world never gets to hear from this place.
Hmm.
That's why you're
That's
being called on
powerful.
to speak from here, even though it doesn't feel the same, and you don't get to participate in all the reasons why anybody gets asked to speak to crowds. It's from a really different place. And so similarly, I'm going through this very long-term labor, like years it went on for me. Um, and and yet I'm being called all over the world to speak and teach. And there were many times when I was like, man, you got no business trying to be in an airport. Like your mind is so swimming
Yeah.
that, all of a sudden I'd be hearing my name being called over the loudspeaker, last call before we close the door. And I'd be like, oh my God, where am I? Where am I supposed to be? And because the linear just keeps
Yes,
unraveling more
because what like it
and
changes your
more.
neurochemistry and your brain does not operate the same. I mean,
No.
it's that's
It's
the
similar to
like
pregnancy, right? It's like moon time, pregnancy
mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm. And
all.
that's
And
what I
so,
mean. If you're not aware of that, like that can be crazy making,
oh
really.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, here's my conclusion about that. And we have this, our creatrix in Diné culture, is changing women. And so
Hmm.
I'm like, oh,
I
now I
love
know.
that.
Now I know why we call you changing woman. I mean, there's a whole story about it, but also she grows from baby to childbearing age woman in a very short period of time in the story about her.
Hmm.
And but I'm thinking about all of this hormonal shift, right? And I'm like, wow, okay. So here's what I feel like is I am not meant to stay in linear mind process quite a bit of my lifespan is the truth. And the only reason that I am is because of modern world paradigm is telling me if I don't stay in linear, might miss out on food, clothing, and shelter. I have to be able to compete, and especially being in my oppressed lesser role of being female,
Hmm.
I have things to prove out there. So I really can't just give in to what's actually happening here. Um, but for me, I feel blessed because once I really acknowledged my moon time, she would not let up on me. She was never going to let me ignore it again. And so when she came, she would take hold of me, and that began to shape my world. I did apply for a job at one point in the middle of that, and I told my potential employer that I would not be showing up for work for 4 days because I needed to attend to this moon time. And I told him, you won't regret it. The benefits that we'll all receive from me taking that time will definitely be worth it, and I got hired to do that. So,
Exponential. Yes. You got hired. I'm so happy to hear that.
yeah.
That's so supportive.
Yeah, and so that was the beginning of her beginning to interrupt modern world paradigm woman for me and
Mm-hmm.
turning me into what I am. And so pretty soon that wasn't even enough. Pretty soon I needed more space and more time. And so I began to be called in different ways. And so now my world is so different. I only take on what I want to do. My time is completely flexible, and I really give a lot of thanks to this journey of the womanhood because I cannot force her anymore. Once I started honoring her, I could not force her
Mm.
to do the linear thing, just because of the clock, just because of the calendar, just because of what the machine that's running this whole situation that's kind of out of control for us right now. And so I feel like I'm this I don't know, I like Bio Akomolafe's word fugitive. I'm a fugitive into a very powerful source of medicine and
Wisdom.
understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I was told that if I could go through this process, and so you were saying, all the women who responded on the thread of you asking, hey, does anybody want to talk about menopause? I'm it was my 49th birthday. And so for me, that was very special because it was bigger than the big 50 because it was 7 times 7, which is a sacred number. So 49. So
Mm.
I was big four
Yeah, I have
nine.
seven tattooed on my arm.
There you go. Yeah. And so I was like, what should I do? Should I get a band? Should I do, I didn't know what to. And my daughter said, my very wise daughter, Lila June, she said, why don't you have a talking circle, Mom? And so I called for this talking circle. And how many? I think we had 32 women show up. And so 32 women bringing potluck. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was really awesome.
But
But
that
we
is just really awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we started this talking circle, and I kicked it off by telling the story I just told you about what the grandmother said to me about what it was and sort of what I was experiencing. And then we started going around. So we had women ages 20 to 70 in this circle. So some of them obviously hadn't gone through it yet, and some of them had, but it was just amazing for people to hear. And by the time we got three-quarters of the way around was the 70-year-old. And she said this thing that you're referring to. She said, I have had such shame about something that happened in my life. And it's been really debilitating to me. And I never understood what was happening until this circle. She said, at one point, I don't know, I guess in her 50s, she said, I actually got committed to an asylum, to a mental institute. And she said, and I really didn't understand why until today. And I was like, oh my gosh.
That
And
just
then
breaks
she
my
said,
heart.
well, that's what they used to do to us with us,
Yeah,
right? That was standard operating procedure,
yeah.
right? But then she said this hilarious thing afterwards. She said, and from this vantage point, I would still say, if they want to lock you up, just let them. Just let them because then you don't have to worry about cooking, you don't have to worry about cleaning, you don't have to do all
I'm
that
not
stuff.
even like for real. I have had that thought before where I was like, maybe, I mean, it would just be a nice break.
So, as I continue to move, I mean, every time I think my hot flashes are gone, they're not. They come and go. And this has been going on. I'm 60. So this has been going on a while. I know one woman in that circle said she'd been going through deep symptoms for 17 years, and
Oh,
that
goodness.
was pretty daunting. I was like, whoa, okay.
Daunting is a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I feel now is, so like when I go to the grocery store or something and there's an elder woman like checking out the stuff standing there, who knows for how long, and I'm just like, oh my God. Oh my God. She's probably going through menopause and she's standing here checking out my stuff, and I just really feel for us. And I just say, again, half the population is moving through these things, and we are
Hmm.
supposed to act like it is not happening.
Biologically, neurochemically, um, psychologically. Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah. So to
affects
find
everything about us.
everything,
Hmm.
everything about us. And so, I just feel like we need to be making spaces at least for us to understand each other, but also ideally for some certain other kinds of considerations for how women move in larger community, right? So that's a much bigger project. But I just feel like naming, that this is such a powerful phenomenon among
Hmm.
us, and it's ludicrous, what we do with it. But for whatever reason, I haven't been allowed to play along at all, at all, and I'm grateful for it. But it's been very deep. There's one other thing I wanted to say about it. Uh, oh, so sometimes men ask me because I do work around sacred masculine and sacred feminine, and they'll say to me, "Well, how can I support the women?" And so one of the things I've been
I'm so glad
saying,
that you're just going there because I was just gonna say.
yeah,
Hmm.
one of the things I was saying is the world needs women's medicine in a desperate, desperate way. And so, but the thing about this women's medicine is, and also because our voices have been squashed for a long time, and and so this isn't across the board, but I think it's a pretty big dynamic where either our voice is squashed or it's coming out raging. And either way, it's very hard for those who are holding what I'll call false power seats to hear either of those things.
Hmm.
So to me, this is also where I feel like I've ended up having a voice in the world was actually through this process of being with myself, understanding myself, and moving from this place. And I feel like all these different situations that I'm in, like there's a visceral response from men that's like it's primal, it's like subconscious or something of like, oh my God, thank God she's here. She's finally here. So this is the feminine that's not railing, that doesn't have something to
Yes.
prove, but is actually moving out of this, well, this spiritual capacity that I'm afforded. So what I say to the men is I say, look, we need to hear from the women's medicine, but what you need to understand is it's not going to come out in PowerPoints necessarily. It's not going to come out in linear ways. And so one of the things I highly recommend is for you to begin to retrain your ear and notice your prejudice against the nonlinear and begin to attune, because the language that comes out from the Moon Lodge, that comes out from this place of this woman who's birthed herself, it's a different kind of language, but
Mm-hmm.
it is absolutely relevant. And so that's change number one, you know. And so what the grandmothers also told me, I forgot to say, is so if you can move through all of this and come out, which is still in process for me, then you'll be in a position to take a seat in the grandmother's lodge. And the grandmother's lodges have to be reinstated on this earth, and they are to be, and they have been, sounded like they were saying to me, the counterpart to masculine leadership.
Mm, yes.
So
And that's, oh, you just, I mean, you said so much, but it is and I was going to say, I'm heartened when I see situations where men are supporting women during that time and pay attention, like when they're in partnership to their partner's moon cycle and show up and nurture them during that time. When that is happening, and I do feel like I don't know, I feel like I'm witnessing it more. So I always look forward to things becoming sort of like critical mass, right? Like, so then when we have these conversations, that's like I'm just honoring the men that do that and pay attention and be willing to speak a different language, and meet us. Like we meet in the middle.
yes, and I think men really need some support during this time too.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot going on over here.
Mm-hmm.
And support is welcome. It's hard, it probably changes from day to day what kind of support is called for. So it's a little hard to just be like, got it. Okay, it's also having to open and feel in and find your intuitive
Mm-hmm.
parts and etc.
And being willing to communicate those things that we need from each other,
Yes.
you know.
And so one other piece that I feel led to add is I find it hard at times that I mean I definitely went through a period where my sensuous aspect was in upheaval and I wasn't sure what I wanted. But there does come, and I keep hearing this from some of my friends are moving through this, that our sensuality goes off the freaking charts at this point.
Yeah.
And you would not know it by watching movies or listening to songs or looking at clothing or anything. But I don't know. I just feel to say men are missing out when they don't realize what's going on over here at this point. Like
Mm-hmm.
seriously. So I'll just
I'm just laughing so playfully, but like for real, I mean, I said my hormones are raging, and there's a part of me that feels very adolescent, you know? But like not like that sort of like irresponsible adolescent, but like from a wiser, like I've got my wiser woman in there supporting me. But in my body, I feel like I'm really at this place in my life after having two children. My youngest she'll be 11 tomorrow. I love my body. Like, with all of its flaws, whatever it is, like I just and accepting myself in this way, and maybe that comes with being in your 40s, and 50s. Um, I look at my body as strong and wise and brilliant. and so I have this like awe for it. Um, and being able to be in tune with it in this way, I'm very grateful. And I'll say, I mean, it is confusing. Like it really is. Like my mind, I mean, this last month I was late getting my period and uh I felt pregnant. Like I felt, and so when you said like birthing yourself, what came to me during that time is that like I'm birthing myself. But like for somebody who, like moving through these things, it's like, wow, this is really, it shakes things up for you in every way. So, and
Yes.
I'm so grateful for the support of the women that I reached out to during that time, close, friendships for me, but people who have a front seat and they're like holding space and we're doing this for each other. And that's what made me want to have this conversation out loud. It's like, we have to be able to do this for each other because that
Yeah.
meant the world to me. I can't imagine going through that all by yourself or with a very limited support system.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I just feel like to to come together and to have that support is really powerful. And I highly recommend Talking Circle about
Mm-hmm.
it. And then I just think you know, I I feel that leadership quality coming on. Um, I find myself in that role in a lot of different situations. And it's just a voice that's moving from a really different place, kind of sometimes interrupting or causing the intellect to freeze in its tracks, but sometimes just kind of electrifying or adding more dimension to, because we always want to solve everything from up here. And I do feel like that's a big part of the role of considering,
Mm,
what happens when we really let women's medicine come in, because it's not going to be coming from up here all the time.
right.
Not to say we can't. We know how to do that, but also from way in
From
here,
a
from
deep, empowered heart center space. Yeah.
yeah.
And even I can tell in my, while, there's a part of me going through that time that's like, wow, this feels crazy and brain fog and all the symptoms, right? But then there's a groundedness that's happening for me. There's a calming that's happening in my nervous system. I can feel my energy, whether it's alignment or just a groundedness, but it feels very empowering. Um, like that, I can't even believe that I want to like go out and talk about these things, but I'm like, no, I feel like we really need to. And I
Yeah.
just have a genuine curiosity about it. So I'm like, let's talk about it out loud. Let's do away with the shame around it, or even, and I'll speak for myself, thinking about, okay, like this means I'm moving out of childbearing years. And there's a grief around that. And that's a very real thing. Um, so honoring all the shifts that are happening and that process.
Yeah. And so for me, and when I was 50, even certainly in my late 40s, I was still like running in the mountains. I mean, I'm a former triathloner, and then even that part changed. And I stopped being able to I mean, I was like total gym rat, and I stopped being able to work out because my energy level was just so low. I'm not
Hmm.
recommending me and my survival of some of this stuff
I
because it was
notice
the
I get lightheaded much more easily in the sun than I used to.
yes,
Um,
a lot of
yeah,
sensitivity.
yeah.
So my way is it's definitely changed. And so part of this, it wasn't just a great brilliant idea on my part. Part of it was forced because I can't resource the same kind of strength that I once did
Hmm.
physically. And so it brings me back to something I said a long time ago, which is, and culturally, I watched, when I was young and strong and athletic, how in the ceremonies the elder women would be like, "We're out of water. Yes, we're out of water. Yes, we're out of water." And I'm like, "Well, heck, let me just go get some water." And then I'd go up to go get the pail, and they'd be like, "You sit down." And so I'd go sit down and I'd be like, I don't understand. So then a man would come walking through camp and they'd be like, we need some more water. So they let him and the men go get the water. And that really struck me at the time because, my feminist sort of girl was not sure what to make of that. But this new consideration of what the genders could mean or might mean, I realized, no, you honor that man's strength, not just when
Yeah.
you Not just when you really need it, but the whole way through, you need to
Hmm.
make sure because at some point you could come to this place, and I am there now, where I need men's strength to do life.
And I
Um,
love that you said that and like really honoring men, but also allowing yourself to receive,
yes.
right? Like to allow them to do that for us.
Yes.
And that they, like you said, you had men who were asking like, how can I support you? They want to. And those that really get it, they understand the value of it and what they will then get back from that, you know? And so yeah, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
If we're not going to leave anybody out, we have to embrace what the woman actually is.
Mm-hmm. Because it allows us then to show up better for them, and that's what
Right.
feeds us in harmony. So,
Yeah, so my willingness to allow you to be what you really are. I mean, this is where I really, it was through this process, and I've said it in other places, but where I really come to honor and respect the masculine eros because
mm-hmm.
I had these surges of, I don't know what, some kind of hormonal thing where all of a sudden I was like, I wanted to have a sensuous encounter with anything that moved. I mean, literally, like standing in line at the bank was painful to be around other bodies and humans. And I was like, what on earth is happening to me? And I remember saying to myself, is this how men feel? And I've told this story in men's groups, and a lot of times, a lot of the room is like, yeah, that's what's going on a lot of times. And so we've made it into this villainous thing, but I'm just like, wow, I thought it was just a choice. Now I understand this is like, I mean, here we are. One of my therapists used to say hormones run the world, okay?
Yeah.
But right? And so I'm like, oh. And then I had all this respect for men who are so respectful with all that energy and fire running. I'm like, oh my God, how do you do that?
Yes.
I said, I mean, it was kind of a gross thing in a way, but it just kind of, and I've been reflecting on it a lot, so I've been trying to learn from it. But I said to myself, if I was a man right now, I'd be a very bad man. Like I understand a very bad man all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've just been like, wow. And so that changed everything for me about my regards with men and their sensuality. Um, in a
It
much
does. It gives you a healthy respect. Like I have such a deep respect for what I'm going to call the honorable man. You
right.
know, I'm like, I bow to you. Thank you.
And it gives me something about that shift really gave me a lot more uh I guess I'll say willingness or courage or openness to that more raw sensuality of the masculine sometimes,
Mm,
like I want to accommodate that too, because I get it now. It's not a power play necessarily. It's not about overcoming me. It's
mm-hmm.
an expression. And
Mm-hmm.
and I want to be able to express myself. And so I want you to be able to express yourself. So it shifted something.
Yeah,
But
I find
it
like
took me
if there's
going
a
through this.
playfulness with that energy.
Yeah.
And I
Like,
also am at this time in my life too, with all of these projects that I'm working on, like I'm really trying to direct that powerful sacral energy, in ways that serve me well in my life, you know.
well, I mean, we're going a little deeper here every minute, but when you say that, I feel like I will say this. So the other thing I feel like I'm learning in this place is what what the medicine of feminine eros is, because my response to sensuous interplay is really different now, and I can sustain pleasure, ecstasy for very long periods of time, which was never true when I was younger. And what actually happens at that point with the right person that I love and trust, that part has to be there, or this
Mm,
doesn't happen. But
yep,
when
same.
that's there, I go off planet. I visit other realms. I meet other beings, and I feel like this is actually ideally what the feminine eros can do with the help of the right lover is to go and
Mm.
retrieve or open ways for these medicines to actually come to earth. And I think, yeah, that's
So what
that.
you're talking about keeps bringing me back to the oracle and honoring the oracle. Yeah.
You mean the elder woman as oracle?
Yes. Yeah, like that we in that space when we are able to make those connections and open ourselves in that way, even when we were talking about, the moon cycle and the opening of the portal, like that's our time to, how I see it, is really shine in ourselves as the oracle that we are.
And one other less heavy thing to say about it is, so I describe my journey. So if there's somebody listening who hasn't gone through it yet, and they're like, "Oh my God," it's different for everyone. And that's the other thing. So it kind of meets you with whatever you need. I believe
Hmm.
at this, and however you need to grow and what you came here for, your purposes or possibilities for helping the situation out. And so it's different for everybody. And some people do just breeze through. Some people don't. I mean, I had to go in super deep. And so similarly, people will say, "Oh, well, you should take this herb, or you should take," And so I say, "Sure, try it out," because and I could give a list of the things that worked for me. But it doesn't. It's different for every woman. So if something is really working for someone, your bestie, and then you try it and it's not
We are
working for you,
so
to give
different. We
up.
really
You
are.
just have to
Yeah.
find your own entourage. And for me, it was of the plant world. And then I say, so then you end up with all these ones that don't do anything for you, and and it's expensive, right? So I said, we need to stop having Tupperware parties, and we need to start having menopausal herbal exchange
Oh,
parties.
yes,
We
please.
can-
I've been using wild yam cream, and I have this calm cream. It's a calm cream with magnesium and like a peppermint. It smells so good. I put that on right before bed. I sleep so well now that I've been using that more regularly. Um, and I'm really good about taking my supplements. Vitamin D is so important to your mental health and well-being and in your body. And maybe we could, share like a list of things if you want when we share this eventually, that worked for both
Sure.
of us. Because I think we both, I mean, I'm not, I don't, to each their own, I just have my preference in how I choose to go through this journey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll name a couple that were kind of really good. One was it was a multi-herb formula called Change O Life. And it has all the usual suspects in it, evening primrose and all these things. But that one was just kind of standard. But one that really helped me with the hot flashes was Siberian rhubarb.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
then I also, for that freight train in the nervous system, oh my God, that was just so hard. But I finally found this herb compound that helped, and it was called Calm PRT.
Hmm.
So it has rhodiola in it. So I do have some rhodiola extract, but I just find this particular thing seems to work well. And then it also has this derivative out of soy, and I can never remember how to say the name. And I think it might have taurine in it, which doesn't work for
Oh,
everybody.
okay. Yeah, to help support the estrogen because it's the depletion of estrogen that like really exacerbates all of those symptoms. So,
Oh, that's a very important point too. So this is the other thing the grandma said to me was this is the time of the burning off of the unessential.
hmm,
And so you might find yourself, and you do see this in elder women, right? And sometimes we get a bad rep for it, but bad rep and a bad rap. But there's just this directness.
yeah,
Start to get like things get you start getting really direct.
yeah.
That's something that I have to watch. But I just learned recently, and maybe you knew this already, but like that's the estrogen disappearing. The estrogen is what makes the woman that glue between all the relationships and making sure everybody's
An
doing okay.
assuage. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Hmm.
that starts receding, and then you get to find out what's underneath all that.
Hmm. I love that you said that because I just had a really hard conversation just a couple days ago and I was able to practice being direct. And I'm noticing in the last 2 years, especially that I've actually referred to it that way. Like I'm being more direct. I'm still kind in delivering my message, but it is different now. And I can see that for some people who aren't used to experiencing me that way, it feels
Exactly.
off-putting. But it's just we're sort of like now getting to know each other in this way. Is how I look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah. So it'd be so helpful if everybody could have menopause 101 in the world, so we would understand Aging Woman 101,
Yes, and
so
I
we could
think like
understand what's happening.
really what I want to leave people with
Expectation.
is Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying just so we could have different expectations.
Yes. Well, that exactly. What I want to leave people with is just having awareness about this, about, within yourself, and then being able to have those conversations, even if it's just with the women who are, right there in your life. But, don't be, I want to say, like, don't be, there's so many women who want to talk about it, actually, who I think want to talk about it. And that's evidenced by just like, I just put out a post who was like, who wants to talk about menopause? And I got so many responses, and not all of them were some people messaged me privately too. So, I was just like, wow, really, I think we want to talk about this and we need to. So,
Yeah.
and thank you
Thanks
for being willing to
for
talk to
having the
me.
conversation. Inviting me.
All right. Well, I would say when I do share this, I probably will share a couple like natural herbs, herbal remedies. I love to, I was just harvesting before we got on this conversation. Um, and I'm sort of just always wanting to lead people back to the natural medicine that's available to us all the time. So I'll do that. And then if there are any additional resources that, you would like to share, if you want to add to that, I'm happy to pass on any wisdom and knowledge for anyone to come across. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of All the Things.